There is one thing without which neither the photographer nor the photo would exist. Light. Light and darkness are fundamental elements of photography, as well as metaphors for many aspects of human existence. As photographers, we use light to create, reveal, and enhance our images, but we also need darkness to contrast, conceal, and balance our compositions. Light and darkness are not just opposites, but complementary forces that interact and depend on each other. As photographers, we can use light and shadow to express our vision, tell a story, or convey a message. But light and shadow are not just physical phenomena. They also have metaphysical meanings and implications. They have been used by many philosophers throughout history to illustrate their ideas and arguments. In this episode, we're going to look at some of those philosophers and their quotes on light and shadow and see how we can apply them to our photography. Let's start with one of the most famous and influential philosophers of all time, Plato. Plato was a Greek philosopher who lived in the 4th century BC. He was the founder of the Academy, the first institution of higher learning in the Western world. He wrote many dialogues in which he presented his views on various topics such as ethics, politics, art, and metaphysics. One of his most famous works is the Allegory of the Cave. Plato's Allegory of the Cave is a famous story that illustrates his theory of knowledge and reality. The allegory begins with a group of prisoners who have been chained inside a dark cave since their birth. They can only see the wall in front of them, where they watch shadows cast by objects and people passing behind a fire. They believe that these shadows are the true reality, and they give them names and meanings. One day, one of the prisoners is freed and brought outside the cave. He's initially blinded by the sunlight, but gradually he sees the real world and the objects that produce the shadows. He realizes that he was living in ignorance and illusion, and that there is a higher and more beautiful reality than the one he knew. He returns to the cave to share his discovery with the other prisoners, but they mock him and refuse to believe him. They think that he has lost his sight and his mind, and they threaten to harm him if he tries to free them. The allegory is meant to show how most people are content with their limited and distorted perception of reality, and how they resist any attempt to challenge or change their beliefs. Plato argues that only through education and philosophy can one escape the cave and attain the true knowledge of the forms, which are the eternal and perfect ideas that exist beyond the physical world. He also suggests that the philosopher who has seen the light of the forms has a duty to return to the cave and help others to see the truth, even if they are met with hostility and violence. The allegory of the cave can be interpreted in different ways, and it has inspired many philosophical and artistic works. Some possible questions to think about the allegory are: what are the sources and limitations of our knowledge and beliefs? How can we distinguish between appearance and reality, and between opinion and truth? What is the role and responsibility of the philosopher in society? How do we respond to new and challenging ideas that contradict our views? How does the allegory relate to our contemporary culture and media? So how can we use Plato's allegory in our photography? Well, one way is to use light and shadow to create a contrast between the visible and the invisible, the superficial and the profound, the illusion and the reality. We can also use light and shadow to symbolize the journey of the soul from ignorance to enlightenment, from darkness to light. For example, we can photograph a person or an object emerging from the shadows into the light. We can also photograph a scene that shows the difference between what we see and what we know, or what we think and what we feel. Speaking of feelings, there was another philosopher who had a lot to say about light and shadow, Carl Jung. Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist and psychotherapist who lived in the 20th century. He was the founder of analytical psychology, a school of thought that explores the unconscious aspects of the human psyche. He also developed many concepts and terms that are widely used in psychology and culture, such as the collective unconscious, the archetypes, the persona, the anima and animus, and the synchronicity. One of his most important and influential concepts is the shadow. The shadow is a dark side of our personality, the part that we repress, deny, or project onto others. It contains all the aspects of ourselves that we consider negative, unacceptable, or inferior, such as our fears, anger, jealousy, guilt, shame, and so on. The shadow is also the source of our creativity, vitality, and potential, as it holds all the qualities and talents that we have not developed or expressed. Jung believed that the shadow is not evil, but rather a natural and necessary part of our psyche. He also believed that the shadow is not something that we can get rid of, but something that we need to integrate and balance with our conscious self. He said that the shadow is the greatest teacher for how to come to the light, and that by confronting and accepting our shadow, we can achieve wholeness and harmony. So, how can we use Jung's concept of the shadow in our photography? Well, one way is to use light and shadow to reveal or conceal the different aspects of our personality or that of our subjects. We can also use the light and shadow to create a contrast between the conscious and the unconscious, the persona and the shadow, the ego and the self. We can also use the light and shadow to symbolize the process of individuation, which is the journey of becoming who we truly are by integrating and transcending our opposites. When we think of some examples of photos that we can use in a Jungian way, think of a photo of a person wearing a mask, with the mask being partially in the light and partially in the shadow. This photo can represent the idea that the mask is our persona, the social role that we play to fit in and please others, and that behind the mask there is our true self, which may be hidden or revealed by the light and shadow. Another idea for a photo you can explore is a person looking at his or her shadow on the wall, with the shadow being distorted or exaggerated. This photo can represent the idea that the shadow is our unconscious self, the part that we are not aware of or that we reject, and that the shadow may reflect or distort our true nature depending on how we relate to it. One last idea might be a person holding a light source such as a flashlight or a candle in front of his or her face, with the light creating a halo around the head. This photo can represent the idea that the light is ourself, the center and the goal of our psyche, and that the light can illuminate and integrate our conscious and unconscious aspects, creating a sense of wholeness and harmony. These are just some examples of how we can use light and shadow to create psychological photos inspired by Jung. Of course, there are many other ways to interpret and apply his concept, and I encourage you to experiment and find your own. We have now reached the end of this episode of Philosopher, Photographer. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. I also hope you feel inspired to use light and shadow in your photography and to explore the metaphysical and psychological meanings and implications of these two elements. Remember, light and shadow are not just physical phenomena, they're also metaphors and symbols of our reality, being, and existence. They can help us express our vision, tell our story, and convey our messages. They can also help us discover ourselves, understand others, and connect with the world. Join me in the next episode as we continue our journey through the beautiful world of philosophy and photography. Until next time.